Okay, how's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, well, so in today's episode, I thought I'd try something completely different and try to say something about some of the most important life lessons that I took away from going to graduate school. So I ended up doing a master's and a PhD in philosophy. Now, of course, I have a lot of memories from that period of my life, but I think that looking back at it now, it really wasn't the philosophical knowledge or content that I gained that's been most beneficial for me. No, what's helped me out the most that I learned from that time are a few different, let's call them virtues or abilities. So, what I'm thinking of here is first of all, discipline, and then humility, and then learning to take intrinsic interest in something rather than just seeing it as a means to an end. And then finally, the ability to interpret material and more broadly, to see the world in different ways. Okay, so let me begin with discipline first. You see, I think that one of the keys to getting a dissertation done is, at least for me, but this shouldn't be a surprise, is just getting up every single morning and writing something down, no matter how little it might end up being. I mean, every day for 4 years, I would get up early and head down to the university and sit in my little cubicle and just start typing. I'd do this from 9 to 12 every single weekday, no matter what was happening and no matter how I was feeling. Now, sometimes I'd manage to write a few paragraphs, sometimes just a few sentences, sometimes just one, believe it or not. Now, that seems very little, but here's the thing, and it's absolutely key. It might seem like little, but it adds up over time. And that's what's important to understand. What's important to understand is that when you commit yourself to being absolutely consistent, to always typing down a few words, no matter what, then yeah, at the end of the day, it might seem a little discouraging, but it won't when you look back at over 2 to 3 years of doing this. It adds up. And it adds up because of the commitment to consistency and to action, no matter how underwhelming the output appears from day to day. Now, I mentioned action just there, and it's an important word in this context. What I mean is that actually getting things down on paper is just as important as the reflection that precedes it. Now, of course, discussion and contemplation and reading is hugely important here in this context. I'm not denying that, but at some point, you do have to just put pen to paper, so to speak, and begin to externalize and weave together all that you've accumulated inside of you. In other words, you have to start the long-term project of writing something down as consistently as possible with the hope of bringing some unity and eventually some closure to it all. And again, this resolve to act bit by bit provides valuable insight because, of course, it's applicable to almost anything, any project that we want to try to do in our life. A commitment to action directed towards the little things eventually makes big things happen. Okay, well, so the second way that I benefited from going through graduate school was that I learned how to really love what I was doing. I really learned to write for its own sake and to craft something. Now, that might seem like a strange thing, but when you think about it, often when we start out writing, in particular essay writing, it's mostly as a means towards an end, right? Not only do we do it by following certain rules, but we ultimately do it to get credit or some such thing. Well, what happened to me is that after a while, I found myself thinking less and less about the outcome and more about the art of what I was doing. And that switch from doing something mostly because it will have future value versus doing it because I found it intrinsically valuable and interesting, well, that changed everything. I couldn't wait to sit down and craft a narrative or write a juicy introduction or whatever. I felt more like an artist and less like a worker putting in my time. I wanted to make it nicely written. I worked on every single sentence. I tried to make it as clear and as beautiful and as lively as I could. Aside from the content, of course, that's what made it so fun and so motivating. I guess maybe my larger point here is that this attitude of seeing things as intrinsically valuable and not just as a means for some further end is immensely rewarding and life-enriching. Actually, it's an attitude or an approach that I try to adopt all the time now. I try to have in my life all sorts of activities or projects which I see as carrying their own purposes or values within them, independently of any external goals that they might eventually produce. I try to fill my days mostly free of activities that are for the sake of something else, which really just means that I change my attitude, such that my engagement with things is marked as much as possible by curiosity and interest and enjoyment, and not by any contingent or external reward. Again, I guess my basic point is that it's possible to transform the basic mechanics of life, however seemingly mundane, into something beautiful and enjoyable when we try to value them for their own sake and not for what they will bring us in the future. And here's the thing, to be free from the future, that's also important. Because to clear your mind and to take interest in something without a concern for the future is really to be engaged and immersed and alive in the present moment, which might be all we have when you think about it, a series of present moments. So we might as well exploit them as fully as we can and not diminish them by attending to what's not yet there. Okay, so the third life lesson or virtue that I got out of going to grad school is an important one. It's humility. And more specifically, humility when it came to expertise and truth, something I think we're missing more and more today. You see, one thing that going to university or college does, especially when you're doing it at the higher level, is that it teaches you that you can't say or claim whatever it is you want. No, because you're around other people with expertise in their field, you are held to account. Now, this forces you to take responsibility and to really spend the time and do the work that you need to do and to really try to get to know your field. You see, truth, or at least something approximating it, is usually hard to discover or to work out. It takes time and effort and sacrifice. And it doesn't care what you want to be the case or how you feel. Anyway, all of this is what I mean by humility. For me, it meant learning that others know far more than I do because they put in the time. And so to trust expertise. And it also meant learning to adapt myself and what I say to what is true, not to try to have things adapt to me. In a way, ultimately, truth is like a big tree or a mountain or something. It's big and intransigent and stubborn and inconvenient. And if it happens to be in our way to some end that we have for ourselves, it just doesn't budge and it doesn't care despite what we want. It's we who have to accept reality. And that's what honesty and humility is. It's a deference to the larger world. It's to admit that there's a reality that exists outside of our own personal orbit of concern. Okay, so the last thing that I learned at graduate school, and this one might sound a bit strange actually, but it was how to be a better interpreter. Now, what do I mean exactly? Well, at a more basic academic level, what I mean is that I just got better at interpreting passages and coming up with unique and hopefully plausible readings of them. And because I was working on ancient philosophy, there was a lot of opportunity to do this, I would say. You see, in some ways, ancient philosophy is not like modern philosophy, in part because it consists of things like dialogues and myths and aphorisms and unfinished, half-lost fragments. And because of this, there's a lot of interpretive space. I mean, just think of someone like Heraclitus, who's reported to have said things like, "The way up and the way down are one and the same." Now, what's going on there? Well, I'm not exactly sure, but it's pretty cool, and it just invites interpretation, doesn't it? Okay, but interpreting text isn't the only thing that I mean when I said that I got better at interpretation. No, I also mean something a bit more important, I would say, a bit larger and more, let's call it, existential. What I mean is that I got better at being able to see everyday things and issues in original and interesting ways, at least to me. I was slowly being freed from the status quo and from the quotidian. I began to look at things from all different types of angles. And this eventually changed my life. It enriched my life because now everything lit up with the potential for being much more interesting and much deeper than I had normally taken it to be. In fact, seemingly everything seemed inexhaustible to me, pregnant with endless meanings and interpretations. I mean, is a sun the atmospheric effects of the sun going down below the horizon? Or is it old age and a period of decline? Is Plato an advocate of human flourishing, or is he pushing totalitarianism? Is sleep altered consciousness, or is it a death and a resurrection? Is God the creator of the universe, or is he an infantile need for a father figure? Is this cup right in front of me something used for drinking, or is it an evocation of my grandmother? The larger point is that sometimes we forget something very important. We forget that, as Heidegger might say, we forget that we are meaning makers. Or as Nietzsche actually said, that we are able to bring more eyes and different eyes to the same object. In other words, a bit like Don Quixote, we have this ability, if we want to use it, to make life a little more enriching and beautiful and interesting than it might otherwise be, just by bringing to bear our powers of interpretation. How amazing is that? One day, the world is as it is, but the next, it's something it has never been before. Bye for now.